And so next I'm going to invite us into the Hara, the space 2 inches below the belly button. And then the true Hara is 3 inches inward. But if we start, like I was saying before, because at each chakra center we can relate to it on an animal level, a human level, or a divine level. And the animal and human nature of the chakra tends to be right on the surface. But the deeper divine levels tend to be deep within us, deep back toward the center of the spine. So if you feel into, on a human level, the Hara, what's there? Well, our belly button's there. What's one of the first experiences we had in this world? We were born, and the doctor or the midwife cut the umbilical cord. When the umbilical cord was cut, there's like a clenching there. There's a sense of our soul fully coming into this body, fully feeling a sense of separation between us and our mother. Now before that moment, we lived in the womb. We lived in this direct connection. We had a lifeline. But when the umbilical cord is cut, there's this unconscious clenching. It's almost like a shock, like, oh, I'm an individual. It's the birth of the ego. And so right here on the surface of the Hara, for most of us, there's this unconscious clenching, this unconscious resistance to life. And it takes many, many years of opening, of relaxing. Most of us have to go through the 3 levels of spiritual awakening: transcendent, heart, and then finally gut. To truly let go of this clenching. This clenching, in a sense, it fuels that unconscious anxiety, that unconscious fear of death, which is also a fear of life. And so many of us have spent time, on a meditation retreat, like we were speaking about earlier, and that fear arises just like an unconscious fear. It's like screaming in the background. I can remember being 13 or 14 years old, and this fear would wake me up at night. It's just like this terrible fear of falling through space, of falling through absolute emptiness, a feeling as if I was completely alone and a victim in this world. So these are all the human experiences of the lower Hara. So it's also a place where, if you feel into fear, it can manifest as anxiety, anxiousness, nervousness in the belly, nausea, anger, rage can also arise out of this lower chakra center. I used to have this absolute rage that God had abandoned me in the world. And it arose out of this center. Had it for many years. I laugh now. Excuse me. I laugh now when I think about it, that God abandoned me, because of course it's not true. We are one with God. And there's nothing to truly be afraid of. For our nature lives on forever, even after death. And so the way we come to realize this, so it's not just talk or not just philosophy, the way we come to realize this is through embracing absolute existential fear, absolute existential terror, absolute existential rage, absolute existential feelings of abandonment. Through opening that doorway. And so if I went back in time to that dream I used to have as a child, you're just free falling through space. And if I brought the light of my awareness there, if I brought my heart there, if I brought my consciousness fully there, I noticed this ego just screaming as it fell through space. If I'm willing to stop and just notice directly, what's happening? What am I experiencing directly? I'm experiencing the ground falling out from under me. What does that feel like? Well, to the ego, it feels like terror. And for many years of my life, I used to look down at the earth and say, I'd even reach down and touch it, like, is the ground falling out? Because my vision, something changed with my vision as I began to open in this way, where it seemed as if the ground was falling out from under me, like literally seeing that. But as I noticed, what's the direct experience of it? Absolute spaciousness. The groundless ground. There's room for everything. The universe is expanding within me in every direction. Now, many of us have this experience. Oftentimes when we meditate, we feel our consciousness up here in the third eye area. It feels just limited. And as we open, our consciousness starts to expand. And it feels wonderful. And many people are comfortable with this because this is one of the lightest levels of our existence. Feels wonderful. But the same thing is happening in this direction. And when we realize this, it's actually happening in every direction, expanding. But as we realize this on the level of the second chakra, the Hara, because it's the seat of the ego, and the ego likes to hold on and control. That's just what it does. Ego is not bad. It's not wrong. It's just a stage of development. It's a stage of divinity. It's a lower stage. It's like it's an animal and human stage. And so in this area is where we have this sense like, I want to control. If you ever feel like, the ground's falling out from under you, what you'll notice is you'll clench your pelvic floor and in your lower belly. There'll be like this clenching of like trying to hold on. Well, there's nothing really you can hold on to in this area. You're just falling. There's a sense of falling, a sense of fear. But if you open there and just come into a reality, if you work with fear, if you become loving with fear. And so I'll slow down a little bit. And so what does it mean to be loving with, say, existential terror? You breathe into it. You feel your feet on the ground. And you courageously walk into the fear, the terror. If any of you have ever walked into terror and experienced it directly, and of course I mean to do this, not while a man is chasing you with an axe or someone shooting a gun at you, and I think that's probably a rare thing. Here in Colorado, it might be being chased by a mountain lion. Again, a rare thing. Probably never going to happen. And so we're doing this, here on our meditation cushion, as you open into terror. What you notice is it's just a subtle vibration, like a subtle screaming. If you feel it a little more deeply, it's radiant, it's alive. There's a feeling of excitement to it. Nothing dangerous about fear or terror. We are not going to die here in this moment. But fear and terror, when you really work with them, they transform into excitement, into this movement of just radiant prana, to this feeling of being totally alive in a boundless and groundless way. Boundless mean ever expanding, never ending, and groundless mean it feels as if the ground falls out from under you. When the Buddha spoke about the law of impermanence, everything being impermanent, he didn't just mean that all objects will fade or dissolve or whatever. He was speaking about the emptiness of all of life. If you feel into your nature, the non-solidity of your nature, It's groundless. It's completely letting go in every direction always. It's eternally falling apart. And yes, simultaneously coming together, but falling apart. And there's this absolute feeling of freedom in it. And so for most of us, when we open into the Hara, we experience fear, terror, gripping, that sense of just wanting to hold on. But as you let go there, as you open there, as you embrace fear, as you begin to work with this, as you begin to let go totally. And this is something we can't necessarily do from our ego, because what's happening is this is where ego dies. It doesn't really die, but it radically lets go. And it comes into a total alignment with truth. This is where you discover your life does not belong to you. This is where the victim dies, because you realize you are no longer separate from God, from life, from anyone or anything. And so yes, it can be terrifying, this journey. This is a space as we let go, and letting go happens from inside out of us. And by that I mean this is not a top-down approach. This is something we open and let go. The same way we let go into sleep, we let go into death. We let go into this space of absolute trust. And what we find is that who and what we are, even though it is groundless, even though it is empty, even though it's spacious, even though it feels as if there is no self here, no one, no thing, nobody, we experience utter non-division, complete and total non-division with all of life. And fear falls away. And so for most of us to go this deep, we have to embrace fear. And I can remember the first time I really experienced this, my political views fell away, my desire fell away, any thoughts of separation fell away. I felt like I had no idea who I was, what I wanted to do, and I fell into this total emptiness and void. And that was simply the beginning. I can remember walking across the floor of my house, my family room. And this feeling just came up from the earth and it pulled me down to the ground. And I asked, what is this? What's pulling me to the earth? It literally pulled my body to the ground. And there was just this warm feeling of death coming over me. And because I have total trust in God, I smiled and allowed myself to be pulled to the floor and had this very bizarre experience of absolutely dying. My consciousness fading into nothingness. Being left in absolute samadhi and also simultaneously like an absolute void-like space where I did not exist. And it was the realization, I do not exist as a separate entity. And simultaneously, who and what I am cannot die. Who and what we are cannot die. And when you wake up to this truth, you begin to discover that all is God. There is no problem. Absolutely no problem. Nothing could be wrong ever. Everything is absolutely perfect and supported and taken care of. Everything is okay. Evolution is okay. War is okay. Violence is okay. Because none of us truly die. And it's not that we are going to do those things. The choice is always to live from the highest. But we realize that all those things are movement of birth and life and death and growth. That this world is eternally growing into something greater. And so there's this absolute trust in the movement of growth, even if it means we go through pain and heartache and suffering.